Hi guys, this one is going to be predominantly for the subscribers. We'll probably release this out to the general public a couple of days, maybe next week at some point. Let's see how things go in the price. I want this to be a little bit of an insight. I've obviously covered the last couple of streams, and especially for subscribers, a little bit of sentiment both ways for the bullish kind of options, as well as the kind of bearish sentiment that I still feel we have a little bit of. So I just wanted to cover this in a little bit more detail. And this is actually something I suppose quite interesting and interesting for different reasons. So this kind of paints both bullish and bearish scenarios, and hope this helps in terms of the kind of trade in this position, whether it's a pullback or whether we go a little bit deeper into this bearish market. So what I'll do is I'll start off on the monthly time frame and I'll just play out one color. So I'm hoping this is going to be my green. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to paint out the 0 to the 1, and then the 1 back down to the 2 up to the 3. Now, if you notice on the 4, what we've actually got here is the 4 is not actually circled yet. Now, there's a couple of reasons that this could be the case. I'm not saying one or the other is the case. I'm just saying that, from personal experience, this is something we have to take into consideration when doing this kind of analysis. So if we were to see that this being the monthly fall, I would expect to see some kind of move down, a move back up, giving us the A to B, and then the B down ultimately to a C. Now, there's nothing stopping the C being the same kind of level. It can go a little bit deeper, or the assumption for many is that it goes down to the 1618 of this range, which would take us down probably to nothing in the grand scheme of things. So I'm kind of a little bit confused as to this move. I'd like to say I want to ignore it, but I think there's too much evidence here to ignore it. And therefore, I'm going to start off with this. I'm going to take these back out and leave this in right now. Now, the second scenario here is that we potentially haven't really reached the monthly 3 yet. Now, in Wyckoff terms, this could be the last move before we get to some kind of buyer's climax, and therefore this could even be this particular position. We've had, the move, we've got the rally. Now, bear in mind, this is a month, so I'm looking at the much bigger time frame, and therefore, if we've got the rally, we could be seeing a UT followed by the UTAD, etc., 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 before we get, a much bigger distribution back down to these kinds of levels again. So I want to keep these scenarios kind of in mind, right? I'm going to take them off the chart just not to confuse the matter. So we have to keep all of this in mind when we step now down into the next time frame. So I'm going to jump from this into the weekly time frame. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this up now in a slightly different way, slightly different color. So if we make the assumption that we clearly are still potentially in the 3, now on the weekly, we can't be in the weekly 3 and the monthly 3 at the same time. Okay, so the first option for me to kind of cover, and the reason that I thought this was quite interesting, is if we now take the move on the weekly time frame and we look at the 0 kind of level back up to the 1 back down to the 2, we've got a 2 up to potentially the 3, 4, giving us a 5 move up here, which could potentially be confirmation on this. However, this isn't what the software is actually painting. So this gives me more reason and logic to the first suggestion on the monthly, that the monthly is not quite complete yet as a 3. Because what the software is suggesting is that we've now come up here and we've come down for the 4 on the weekly, giving us a 5 move on this in terms of the weekly move from the monthly, if that makes any sense. So first scenario in this case is that if we look at the Fibonacci relationships, ignore the monthly, I'm just going to keep that green in the background. So what I'm really focused on right now is the weekly in red. Okay, so step 1, if I look at the Fibonacci extension, we can clearly see that from this move up and back down to the 2, we've actually got an extension way above the 1618, way above the 2618. And I wouldn't mind betting if I put this on, let me just try something like a 618 just to see. So I'm going to put a 6.618 just to see. And if this is anywhere near, let me just put this in another color. then I think obviously we could start to look at this being potentially that 3 for the weekly, given a bit more confirmation on this one. So I'm just going to do exactly the same thing, just roughly the bottom up to the 1 and then roughly the 2. So we haven't quite made the 618 there. Yeah, maybe it's the 5, looking at the gap in between there. We've probably got that in the middle sitting here. And therefore, yeah, we've probably gone over the 50% marker. I'm not going to bother re-recording this in terms of coming to the 5. So, you know, it could easily be. And therefore, the next level that I'm relatively interested in is the amount of pullback that we've seen in this particular move. So now I'm going to go into the retracement tool and I'm going to look at this up to the top. And we've actually got more or less to the pip a 618 pullback on this move. So if we were to just assume that 3 is usually the longest, and there's a lot of reasons that we teach, you know, why and what and where this is, you know, ultimately. If we were to assume that that's where we are as a whole, and this is what I think we are, where we are right now, if again this makes any kind of sense, then what I want to look at is where would the likelihood of a 5 move finish. Now, what we have to go back and refer to is that if the monthly 3 is not quite complete, we've got acceptable fib levels on the weekly time frame coming down for the 4. We've got a clear ABC move in here and a range bound move kind of sideways before the move actually started, which means if we were to take us down to the daily, I'd be looking at the daily move, which what I'll do is I'll put this on before coming into the daily, and I'm going to stick this in maybe something like a pink. And therefore, on this particular move, I'll be looking at a 0 to 1, a 1 pullback 2, and then a 2 up to potentially the current 3. And we'll go into this bit in a second on the pink side of things. So first things first, on the move up to a 3 monthly, assuming that the 3 hasn't yet been completed, we have to look at potential extension levels on this move. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just use the weekly, but actually put this onto the extension all the way back from practically 0. Again, I don't have to be too fussy on the kind of levels I'm looking at here. And therefore, where are we? Well, we've clearly cleared the 2618, which would be an acceptable 3 in regards to an Elliott monthly 3 move overall. So that's kind of step 1. If we assume that the software is correct, if we assume that that's what we're looking at right now, what we now want to be looking at is on this weekly time frame, where potentially are we likely to see extension levels. I'm going to use this one again. And where would we likely see this extension coming out for a completion on the big picture? So if we take first of all the top being the 3, we have a second level being the 618 or 6.618, which is quite a nice level. So that's only 72,000 roughly, which gives us quite a nice range overall in terms of this particular move. Now, the other thing we can do is we could actually use another little technique, which would give us another view of the same thing at a 1618 of this particular level. So what I'm going to be looking for on this move is taking the level down and back up, which means I'm going to go from the fib extension levels, and I'm going to look at this here and back down to this particular one there, and that giving me basically the 1 being at 5, and if you can see behind this, you'll see get there, and the 1618 at 127, right? So I'm just going to mark these up a second in terms of the current levels, and I'm just curious as to would they fit on any of the other charts on the bigger time frame. Okay, so right now I'm happy with these kind of levels. We've got potential target 1 at roughly the, what's this one, 67. We've got target 2 potentially at 90k, and a much bigger target of the 1618 up here at the 127-ish kind of mark. Now bear in mind this is the monthly move. Now the reason I don't like some of this is that if we have to assume that from the weekly into the monthly, I'm getting confused in terms of the weekly, monthly, daily on this. If we move into the monthly time frame being 3 not quite complete, I would anticipate a much sharper, heavier move as we move up here, right? So if we assume that we're not in yet on the monthly 4, and this was the weekly 4, given us a weekly 5, I'll come into these extensions in a second, but let's just assume that it's only just going to poke its head above the all-time high. It would be a very cruel move for a lot of investors, a lot of retail traders, if we were to take out the all-time high and come all the way back down to, 23, 25, 30K. And there is lots of logic as to why we could easily drop down to that level, given we've actually got the A, B, C potential move taking us down, where I think they've actually measured this at 26.5. So 25 could be an obvious level on a monthly pullback, but we could actually see a 65 first, taking us into this particular range before a bigger drop down, which, like I said, would be a very, very cruel move overall. So if I just get rid of the last couple here and take this one out, we assume that we've got where we are right now, and let's just assume that the 4 is in. I'm now going to step down to the daily and look at the current daily move in terms of our current situation. So can we take any Fibonacci levels from this particular move? And that's really what I'm trying to determine next as to where we are, in this overall cycle. So I'm now going to put in the Fibonacci retracement levels, and I'm going to go from what would we assume a 2 to a 3, and let's assume that the 3 is currently in. Then realistically, we've got target 1, I'd like to say around the 42, 42 and a half. I'd like to say 40K is quite interesting for me as well, and potentially on the depth of this, a 36, 37 move overall. We might go a little bit deeper, we might come all the way back down. There's nothing stopping it coming 99% of the way and still keeping this valid. So 32, I'm just going to mark all of these in so we've got these kind of lined up for later on. Probably should have changed the color on this. So let's assume that we've got these levels here, and therefore these targets would be this one, the only one that I'd be comfortable with as the depth before invalidating this particular move up, right? So for me, 36, 880, roughly whatever that is, and I'll have to come back to the high of the one. So whatever this one high is, let me see if I can edit this one. Now I might not be able to, no, I can't edit that at the moment. So the suggestion would be from basically there to there, and then there to there, and what I'll do is I'll delete the older versions of this. So in essence, what I'd be looking for is these two would not actually be valid, although we can come obviously 99% down on the move. It is more often than not a 38 to 50, which means the real golden zone is more likely this level here, around 42.3 down to around 40,000 realistically, giving us a kind of golden zone in terms of a potential pullback for this particular move. So let's anticipate that this was the 3's in and we coming down for a 4, and then the 4 coming up here. What I'll do is I'll just change this color again just because it's forecasting rather than current, and therefore I'm going to change this to something quite bright and vibrant, and let's put this in here. Now the suggestion for this is they have this marked up at around a similar level to the monthly move. Oh, this is going to be quite cruel if this move does actually play itself out. So let's assume that we are now in this move back up. I think a lot of retail will assume, bullish momentum. This is going to the moon. And the irony is, we've got another 15K-ish from this level before we get a much bigger crash in the bigger time frame. So I think for me, just looking on this validation, I think I didn't like this move, and I've done a video. I'll actually post that again, kind of in the top right in terms of the YouTube link. So I've done a video covering that as to why I didn't like this 1, 2, 3 move. But let's just say that the bias was wrong. I'm actually happy to say, look, I'm not in this trade yet. I've missed out a lot in terms of the bottom, but I'm okay with that. The reality is I'm looking for the bigger time frame move, and I'd like to kind of sit in with comfort rather than stressing about every single swing. And at the moment, this move hasn't given me that confidence on its way up. So the next step is, in terms of the extensions, if we go 0 to 1 and back down to 2 now on the daily, so we've got the green being monthly, the red being weekly, and the pink purple being the daily, we now can see that we've got clearly a 1618 move here at the 42k. So that gives me confidence that that was probably the 3 move within the wave. So we've got now, I'll come into a different color again in a second. We then have the 2618 at this particular level. So again, confidence in that particular move here. So this particular move 2 to 3 has actually given more reason and logic for this to actually be the 1-2 move. So I'm just going to assume that the software is right. I'm happy with this particular move, and I'm going to say that inside that, I'm going to change this to something again quite bright. I'm going to say that in this particular move, we clearly had nothing in terms of the 1-2, because I think the assumption is this move here. So I don't like this personally, but let's just go with the software and say, okay, this was the 1, this was the 2 move, and then we're going up 3, 4, and 5. That's actually not that bright, so I'll just cover this in another brighter color. Something a bit darker, sorry. Let's go into something like this. There we go. So the assumption is either here or potentially there. Personally, I don't like either of these, so I'm going to go from there down to 2, 2 up to 3, 3 we're going to come down 4, and 5 to complete before we get a corrective wave. Now, 1 in either instance is possibly the longest. That doesn't really invalidate anything in terms of Elliott, because as long as 3 is not the shortest, which at this particular price point 5 would actually be the shortest, then everything is still valid. And then the move back down, we could easily anticipate the move back down to the region around ultimately this 4 here. So 44 roughly is what they're looking at. We got a zone just before this, so a drop down ABC move down into around 41, 42 level even makes a lot of sense on the intraday timeframes in this particular move, if we assume that the 3 has now come in on the daily. So one way or the other, we can start to break down either where we are and where we want to be. Now, I keep coming back to this on the monthly. The one thing that really does scare me here is that I really feel if we take this move here, and this is only our 1, we're going to see a 1, 2, we're going to get a 3 here, a 4, and a 5, right? Now, the conflict and the confusion here would be if we forecasted now, assuming this as a 0, 1, and a 2 move, then realistically what we're going to be looking for is the next levels at, from here 0 to 1, we want to go 1, 2, and a pull back here. We're going to look at the same kind of levels. We got a 4, 6, 1, 8. There's probably a higher, yeah. So they've got their percentages up here around 80k, which means realistically we're going to finish somewhere in the 65 to 72k range, even on the assumption of this move up taking us to a 3 monthly high. So at the moment, my upside forecast target would be around the 72,000 level, and I'm going to be looking for a potential entry around the 41, 42k level realistically. So that's where we are at the moment in terms of the bullish side of this. I am going to revert back one more time just to the monthly, because if that is the case, then I genuinely feel even with the new monthly high coming in 3, I feel that we've got the 4 potentially lower. The second option for me, based on only the monthly, is that we're currently in this move here from the 3 down, giving us the A, the move back up to where we currently are, giving us the current B. A C would actually take us down lower, which means once we get around that 41, 42k level, if the character bigger time frame is still suggesting a drop, then I'm still going to keep my bearish sentiment overall. If the weekly stochastics line up with a long move at the 42k level, I'd be comfortable taking that probably no greater than 62, 63k before getting out for the fear of a big drop coming back all over again to give us our monthly fall. So I think for me, this is where I'm at the moment. I think it's the character now on this particular pullback, and then that'll give me some kind of reason, some logic for where I'd like to take this, why I'd like to take this, and where ultimately we end up going next. So yeah, I hope this one helps again and just kind of gives you a glimpse into what I'm seeing, why I'm seeing it, and obviously one of the things that we've been teaching in Discord, and hopefully this will help get away with some of that FOMO in terms of taking trades, jumping in too early, jumping in too late in the wrong direction, and consistently losing. So yeah, I hope this one helps, and we'll see you in the next video.